The morning started wrong. Lena woke to her father's boots on the stairs. Heavy, deliberate, the kind of footsteps that said he'd already made a decision. She pulled the thin blanket to her chin, staring at the water-stained ceiling of their rented room above the feed store. 3 years in Dry Hollow, and the stains hadn't changed. Nothing changed except how much they owed. "Get up." Thomas Cross stood in the doorway, hat already on. He wouldn't look at her. She sat up slowly. "We leaving?" "You are." The words hung there. Lena's stomach dropped. She'd heard rumors about girls disappearing from frontier towns, sent east to work in factories, or worse. Her father had always said they'd never sink that low. That the Cross family, however poor, had standards. Apparently standards cost more than they could afford. "Huh. Don't." He turned away. "Get dressed. Something decent. We're going to the square." Decent. She owned 2 dresses. One had a torn hem. The other had belonged to her mother, kept in a trunk for 3 years since the fever took her. Lena hadn't touched it. Touching it meant accepting that her mother was really gone, that this was really her life now. She pulled it out. The fabric smelled like cedar and dust. Her hands shook as she buttoned it, each button a small betrayal. Her mother had worn this dress to church, to town meetings, to the 4th of July dance where she'd laughed so hard she'd cried. Now her daughter was putting it on to be sold, because that's what this was. Lena wasn't stupid. Downstairs, her father waited with a cup of coffee he didn't offer to share. The street outside was already loud. Wagons rolling through, miners heading to the claims, someone's dog barking endlessly. Dry Hollow woke up mean and stayed that way. "You understand why this is happening," Thomas said. Not a question. Lena stared at the floor. "No. We're 3 months behind on rent. The store won't give us credit. I can't work the claim alone, and you—" He stopped, started again. "You eat too much for what you're worth here." There it was, the math of her existence. "So you're selling me. I'm finding you a situation. Could be good for you, better than starving in this room." "Could be." Her voice sounded strange, flat. "You don't know. I know we're out of choices." He stood, drained the coffee, and walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. For a moment, Lena thought he might turn around, might say he was sorry, that he'd find another way, that he'd made a mistake. He didn't turn around. "Square. 10 minutes." The door shut. Lena sat alone in the silence, wearing her dead mother's dress, trying to remember how to breathe. Team. The square wasn't really a square. It was a wide patch of dirt where 3 streets met, surrounded by buildings that leaned like drunks. The assay office, the land claims recorder, the supply depot, and the Rusty Bell Saloon. A water trough sat in the center, brown with rust and algae. Today, someone had dragged out a shipping platform, waist high, sturdy enough to hold cargo. Or a girl. People were already gathering. Not a crowd yet, but enough. Men, mostly. A few women hung back near the saloon, watching with expressions Lena couldn't read. Pity, maybe, or relief that it wasn't them. Her father walked her to the platform without speaking. His hand on her elbow was firm, but not rough. Probably didn't want her bruised. Damaged goods brought less. "Up," he said. Lena climbed the steps. The wood was warm under her feet. She'd forgotten shoes. Forgot on purpose, maybe. Some part of her brain had decided that if she looked pathetic enough, this wouldn't happen. Someone would intervene. The mayor, the sheriff, some good person would step up and say this wasn't right. Nobody stepped up. She stood there, facing the growing crowd, hands clasped in front of her. Her father moved to the edge of the platform and cleared his throat. "Appreciate you all coming." His voice carried across the square. Practiced. He'd thought about what to say. "Times are hard. Everyone knows that. I got a girl here, good girl, strong, healthy, and I can't feed her anymore. So I'm looking for someone who can." Lena's face burned. She stared at a point above the crowd, at the mountains beyond town. They looked cool and distant, indifferent. She can cook, clean, mend, good with animals, reads and writes. Her ma saw to that. 16 years old, no trouble. Someone in the crowd laughed. "How much trouble can she be? Look at her." More laughter. Lena's vision blurred. "Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. I'm looking for a fair trade, her father continued. Supplies, tools, or cash. She's worth it. I wouldn't offer otherwise. A man near the front, red beard, missing teeth, called out, I'll give you $10 and a bottle of whiskey. She ain't a whore, Garrett. Didn't say she was. Said I'd pay for household help. $20, someone else shouted. And a mule. The bidding had started. Lena closed her eyes, tried to go somewhere else in her mind. Tried to remember her mother's voice, singing while she kneaded bread. Tried to remember what it felt like to be a person instead of a transaction. 30 and supplies, flour, coffee, and sugar. 35. 40 and I'll throw in a rifle. Her father was nodding, considering. The numbers climbed, 50, 60. Men she'd never seen before were deciding her value, her future, her life. She wanted to scream, wanted to jump off the platform and run. But where? Into the desert? Into the mountains where wolves and worse things waited? $75, a new voice said. Final offer. The crowd shifted, murmuring. Lena opened her eyes. A man stood at the back, separate from the others. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy canvas coat despite the heat. Dark hair, dark beard, face like carved stone. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at her father, and his expression said the conversation was over. Lena had seen him before. Everyone in Dry Hollow had seen Rowan Hale. He came to town maybe 4 times a year, bought supplies, sold furs and timber, never spoke more than necessary. People said he lived somewhere up in the high country, alone. People said a lot of things about him, most of them rumors built on nothing but the fact that he didn't talk. Some said he'd killed a man back east. Some said he'd been a soldier, came back wrong. Some said he was crazy. Looking at him now, Lena couldn't tell if any of it was true. She could only tell that he was serious and that the crowd had gone quiet. Her father hesitated. That's a good offer. It's the only offer you're taking. Rowan's voice was low, rough from disuse. He stepped forward, pulling a leather pouch from his coat, tossed it to Thomas, who caught it clumsily. Thomas opened it, counted. His face changed, relief and guilt fighting for space. She needs, Thomas started. She needs nothing from you. Rowan cut him off. We done? Thomas looked at Lena. For the first time all morning, really looked at her. She saw something flicker in his face, regret maybe, or just exhaustion. Then it was gone. Yeah, he said quietly. We're done. Rowan jerked his head toward a wagon parked at the edge of the square. Get your things. Lena stared at him. I don't have things. Then get in the wagon. She didn't move. Couldn't. Her legs had forgotten how to work. The crowd was dispersing, disappointed the show was over. Her father had turned away, was walking toward the supply depot with his blood money. And this stranger, this silent, frightening stranger, was waiting. Now, Rowan said. Not loud, not mean, just final. Lena climbed down from the platform, walked to the wagon on legs that didn't feel like hers. The bed was half full of supplies, sacks of flour and beans, tools, rope, a rifle wrapped in oilcloth. She pulled herself up, sat on a sack of grain, and stared at her hands. Rowan climbed onto the bench, took the reins. The horses started forward without him saying a word. Dry Hollow fell away behind them. Lena didn't look back. They rode in silence for an hour. The road, if you could call it that, wound through scrub brush and red rock, climbing steadily into the foothills. The air got cooler. The town sounds faded, replaced by wind and the creak of wagon wheels and the steady clip of hooves on stone. Lena sat in the back, trying not to exist, trying not to think about what came next. Her mind kept offering possibilities, each worse than the last. She'd heard stories. Girls bought by miners, by trappers, by men who didn't see women as people. Girls who disappeared into the wilderness and were never heard from again. She should run. Should wait until they stopped, until he wasn't looking, and run. But where? She had no money, no supplies, no idea where she was. And even if she made it back to Dry Hollow, what then? Her father had made it clear she wasn't his problem anymore. So she sat and rode and waited to find out what kind of monster had bought her. After 2 hours, Rowan spoke. You hungry? Lena blinked. What? Hungry? You eat today? She hadn't. There'd been no time, no food, no point. No. He grunted, pulled the wagon to a stop, climbed down and rummaged in a pack, came back with something wrapped in cloth, tossed it to her. Bread. Hard and dense, but bread and dried meat. Lena stared at it. Why? You're hungry. You don't know that. I asked. He climbed back onto the bench. Eat or don't. Up to you. The wagon started moving again. Lena looked at the food in her hands. It could be poisoned. Could be a trick. Could be... Her stomach growled so loud she flinched. She ate. The bread was plain but good. The meat was tough, gamey, venison maybe. She ate slowly, trying to make it last, and with each bite some of the fog in her head cleared. When had she last eaten? Yesterday morning? The day before? When she finished, she felt almost human again. Almost. Thank you, she said quietly. Rowan didn't answer, maybe didn't hear, or maybe just didn't care about being thanked. They climbed higher. The road got rougher. Pine trees appeared, tall and dark, crowding close. The temperature dropped. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, wishing she'd brought a shawl, wishing she had anything that was hers. Cold? Rowan asked. I'm fine. He stopped the wagon again, pulled a blanket from under the bench and handed it back to her without comment. Lena took it. The wool was scratchy but warm. She wrapped it around her shoulders and didn't say thank you this time because she didn't understand what was happening. Didn't understand why a man who'd bought her like property was giving her food and blankets and asking if she was comfortable. It had to be a trick. Had to be. She just couldn't figure out what kind. The cabin appeared near dusk. It sat in a clearing carved from the pines, built from logs the color of old honey. Smoke rose from a stone chimney. A lean-to beside the cabin sheltered a couple of goats and some chickens. A creek ran somewhere close. Lena could hear it, but not see it. The whole place looked solid, settled, like it had been there forever. Rowan pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down, started unloading supplies without speaking. Lena sat in the wagon bed, clutching the blanket, not sure what to do. You planning to help or just watch? Rowan said, not looking up. She scrambled down, grabbed a sack of flour, heavier than she expected, and carried it toward the cabin. The door was open. Inside was dark, warm. She could make out a table, a stove, shelves lined with jars and tins. Not inside, Rowan said behind her. Cellar. Doors around back. Lena found the cellar door set into the ground, propped open with a stick. Stone steps led down into darkness. She hesitated. Shelves on the left, Rowan called. Set it anywhere. She descended carefully. The cellar smelled like earth and preserves. Her eyes adjusted enough to see the shelves he mentioned, already half full of supplies. She set the flour down and climbed back up, breathing hard. Rowan was already carrying another load. They worked in silence until the wagon was empty and Lena's arms ached. Then Rowan unhitched the horses, led them to a small paddock behind the cabin, and started brushing them down. Lena stood in the clearing, unsure. The sun was almost gone. The trees were turning into dark shapes. She was cold, exhausted, and completely lost. Inside, Rowan said, not looking at her. Get the stove going. Wood's by the door. She went inside. The cabin was one large room with a loft above. The stove dominated one wall, cold and dark. Lena found the wood, split logs stacked neatly in a box, and opened the stove door. There were ashes inside, still faintly warm. She'd watched her mother do this 1,000 times, but doing it herself was different. It took 3 tries to get the kindling to catch, and even then the fire was weak and smoking. By the time Rowan came in, she'd managed a small flame. He looked at the stove, at her, and nodded once. Good enough. That was apparently all the praise she was getting. He lit a lantern, set it on the table, and started pulling things from the shelves, coffee, beans, a jar of something that might have been preserves. Lena watched, trying to figure out what he expected from her, trying to figure out when the other shoe would drop. You cook? He asked. Some. Beans need soaking. Jars over there. He pointed to a ceramic crock near the sink, an actual sink with a pump handle. Lena found the beans, found water, started soaking them like her mother had taught her. The routine was steadying, familiar. She could do this. She could be useful. Maybe if she was useful enough, he wouldn't. "You'll sleep in the loft," Rowan said. Lena froze. He was watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "There's a bedroll up there. You'll use that. I sleep down here." "You—" Her voice cracked. "You're not—" "No." One word. Flat. Final. Lena's knees went weak. She gripped the edge of the sink. "Then why did you buy me?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment. He poured coffee into a battered tin cup, took a sip, and stared at the stove. "Because nobody else should have," he said finally. "To what?" That first night, Lena didn't sleep. She lay in the loft on the bedroll Rowan had mentioned, surprisingly clean, surprisingly comfortable, and stared at the rafters. Below, she could hear him moving around. The clink of dishes, the scrape of a chair, the creak of the door as he went outside. Came back in, went out again. She waited for him to climb the ladder. Waited for the violence she'd been promised by every story she'd ever heard about men like him. He never came up. Eventually, the sounds stopped. She heard the creak of a bed frame. He must sleep near the stove. Then nothing but the pop and hiss of dying embers. Lena lay awake until the sky through the loft window started to lighten. Only then did she let herself close her eyes. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a confused moment, she thought she was home. Thought her mother was downstairs making breakfast. Thought she could hear her father's voice asking about the claims office hours. Then she remembered everything. She sat up fast, disoriented. The loft was bright with morning sun. Below, Rowan was at the stove, cooking like this was normal, like he hadn't bought a human being yesterday. Lena climbed down the ladder. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair a mess. She felt dirty and wrong and completely out of place. Rowan glanced at her. "You sleep?" "No." He nodded like that made sense. Slid a plate across the table. Bacon, beans, bread. "Eat." Lena sat, stared at the food. Her stomach was a knot of hunger and fear. "It's not poisoned," Rowan said, reading her mind. He sat across from her with his own plate and started eating. Lena picked up a fork. The food tasted fine. Better than fine. When had she last had bacon? They ate in silence. When Lena finished, Rowan took the plates to the sink and started washing them. She watched, confused. Men didn't wash dishes. Men didn't cook. Men didn't— "You got questions," Rowan said, not turning around. "Ask them." Lena's mouth was dry. "What do you want from me?" "Work." "What kind of work?" "The kind that needs doing, cooking, cleaning, tending the animals, mending, whatever you can manage." "That's all?" He dried his hands on a rag, turned to face her. His expression was still unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something tired. "I live alone," he said. "Work alone. It's hard. Extra hands make it easier. That's the arrangement." "You could have hired someone." "Could have. Didn't." "Why not?" "Because hired help leaves." He pulled on his coat. "You don't have that option." There it was, the truth underneath everything. She wasn't free. She was just trapped differently. "I could run," Lena said. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. "You could. Probably die trying, but you could try." He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. "Rules," he said. "You don't go in my things, you don't waste food or supplies, you pull your weight, and you stay out of the woods alone. There's wolves, bears, worse. Follow those and we'll get along fine. And if I don't, then we won't." He left. Lena sat at the table, alone in the cabin, and tried to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. The first week was a test. Rowan gave her tasks, simple ones at first. Feed the chickens, gather eggs, pump water, and fill the barrel by the door. Lena did them, waiting for the catch, waiting for him to show his true nature. He didn't. He worked from dawn until dark, cutting timber, checking traps, repairing things that didn't look broken. He spoke only when necessary. He never touched her. Never even stood too close. At night he cooked, or she did, with him watching silently, correcting her when she did something wrong. Then he'd sit by the stove, cleaning his rifle or mending tools, while Lena retreated to the loft. It was the strangest, most uncomfortable routine she'd ever experienced. By the second week, Lena started to notice things. The way Rowan moved, efficient, deliberate, like someone who'd lived alone so long he'd forgotten other people took up space. The way he checked the door locks every night. The way his eyes went distant sometimes, like he was seeing something that wasn't there. He was damaged. That much was obvious. Whatever had driven him to these mountains, it had left marks. But he wasn't cruel. One morning, Lena woke to find a new dress laid out at the foot of the ladder. Plain, practical, the right size. "Yours was falling apart," Rowan said when she came down. He didn't look at her. "Got that in town last trip. Figured you'd need it eventually." Lena touched the fabric. It was rough homespun, nothing fancy. But it was new, clean, hers. "Thank you," she said. Rowan grunted and went outside. That afternoon he taught her how to split wood, showed her how to position the log, how to swing the axe, where to aim. She was terrible at it. The axe was too heavy, her arms too weak. But he was patient in a way that surprised her. Didn't yell when she missed, just repositioned the log and told her to try again. After an hour, she managed to split one piece cleanly. "Better," Rowan said. High praise, coming from him. Lena's arms shook with exhaustion, but she felt something strange blooming in her chest. Something like pride. 3 weeks in, Lena started to feel almost normal. She had a routine now. Wake at dawn, feed the animals. Start breakfast while Rowan brought in water. Eat together in silence. Then her tasks for the day: weeding the small vegetable garden, mending clothes, preserving food from the garden, learning to cure meat properly. The work was hard. Harder than anything she'd done in Dry Hollow. But it was hers. She could see the results, could see herself getting stronger, faster, more capable. Rowan noticed too. "You're doing good," he said one evening, out of nowhere. They were sitting outside, watching the sunset behind the mountains. Lena had just finished patching a hole in the chicken coop. Not well, but functional. She was covered in dirt and splinters and felt weirdly accomplished. "Good at what?" she asked. "Adapting." Lena looked at him. He was staring at the trees, face unreadable as always. "Didn't have a choice," she said. "Everyone's got choices. You could have given up. Could have made this harder than it had to be. You didn't." It was the most he'd said to her in one sitting. Lena didn't know what to do with it. "Why do you live up here?" she asked. "Alone." Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Because I'm better at it than being around people," he said finally. "Better or just used to it?" He glanced at her, almost smiled. Almost. Smart question. That night, Lena fell asleep without waiting for danger. For the first time since leaving Dry Hollow, she felt something that might have been safe. But the 4th week, everything changed. Lena was in the garden when she heard horses, multiple horses, moving fast. She stood, shading her eyes, and saw them coming up the trail. 3 riders, pushing hard. Rowan appeared from the tree line, rifle in hand. He saw the riders, and his whole body went tense. Inside, he said to Lena, "Now." She ran. From the loft window, she watched the men arrive, rough-looking, armed. The leader was someone she recognized from Dry Hollow, Bill Carson, a claim jumper with a reputation for violence. "Rowan Hale," Carson called out, staying mounted. "Heard you got yourself a girl." Rowan stood in front of the cabin, rifle loose in his hands. "Heard wrong." "Don't think so. Got a man in town says he sold you his daughter, says you paid good money for her." "What I paid for is my business." Carson grinned. "See, that's where you're wrong. Girl like that, young and pretty, that's everybody's business, especially when her pa's having regrets." Lena's blood went cold. "Thomas Cross sent you?" Rowan's voice was flat, dangerous. "Among others. See, we got a thinking. One man, one girl, all the way up here alone. That don't seem right. Seems like maybe you need some company. We'd be happy to help, for a fair price." The other men laughed. Rowan didn't move. "Leave." "Or what? You gonna shoot all 3 of us?" "If I have to." The laughter died. Carson's smile got uglier. "You might get one of us, Hale. Maybe 2 if you're lucky. but not all three. And when we're done with you, we'll take our time with her. That what you want? Lena's hands gripped the windowsill. Her heart was trying to break through her ribs. She looked around the loft frantically. There had to be something, some weapon, some way to help. Below, Rowan's voice cut through the clearing, cold as winter. You want to try me, Carson? Go ahead. But know this, I've been killing men since before you learned to shave. I'm good at it, better than good. And I got nothing left to lose. So ask yourself, is one girl worth dying for? Silence. Carson's horse shifted uneasily. The other men were looking at each other, uncertainty creeping in. This ain't over, Carson said finally. It is. You come back up here, you won't leave. Carson stared at Rowan for a long moment. Then he jerked his reins and turned his horse. The other men followed. In seconds, they were gone, swallowed by the trees. Rowan stood there for a full minute after they left, rifle still ready. Then he lowered it, and Lena saw his hands were shaking. She climbed down the ladder, legs weak. Rowan turned as she appeared. You okay? He asked. Lena nodded, couldn't speak. They'll come back, Rowan said quietly. Maybe not Carson, but others. Word's gotten around. He looked at her, really looked at her. You understand what that means? Lena understood. She wasn't safe. Would never be safe as long as people knew where she was. What do we do? She whispered. Rowan stared at the trees where the men had disappeared. His jaw was tight. We get you out of here, he said. No, they left before dawn. Rowan packed supplies in grim silence. Food, water, weapons, a bedroll. Lena gathered what little she owned. The new dress, the blanket, her mother's old dress she still couldn't let go of. Where are we going? She asked. North. There's a settlement, decent people, law that actually means something. We get you there. Get you registered under protection. Nobody can touch you. And then what? Rowan didn't answer, didn't need to. They both knew what happened then. She'd be safe, and he'd be alone again. The ride was brutal. Rowan pushed them hard, barely stopping. They traveled through the day, into the night, through the next day. Lena's whole body ached. She didn't complain. On the second night, camped in a narrow canyon, Rowan finally spoke. Your father, he said, he know what kind of men he sent after you? Lena stared at the fire. Probably. And he still... Rowan stopped, started again. Why? Money. Always money. Rowan was quiet. Then, my father sold me too. Different way, but same result. Lena looked at him, shocked. He'd never talked about himself before. Military, Rowan continued, staring at the flames. Signed me up when I was 15, got a bonus for it. I spent 10 years killing people for causes I didn't understand, came home and found out he'd drunk himself to death with the money. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. Some fathers ain't worth having. Why'd you buy me? Lena asked. Really? Rowan looked at her across the fire. His eyes were dark, haunted. Because I know what it's like, he said quietly. To be sold, to be nothing. And I figured if I could stop it happening to one person, maybe that would mean something. Lena's throat was tight. Does it mean something? Ask me when you're safe. They reached the settlement the next afternoon. It was bigger than Dry Hollow, real buildings, real streets, a church and a school and a sheriff's office with actual bars on the windows. People moved with purpose, like they had somewhere to be, like they had futures. Rowan led her straight to the sheriff's office. The sheriff was a woman. That was the first surprise. Tall, gray-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. She listened to Rowan's explanation without interrupting, then looked at Lena. This true, girl? Your father sold you? Lena nodded. And this man here, he hurt you anyway? No, ma'am. The sheriff studied them both. That's a strange story. It's the truth, Rowan said. I believe you. She pulled out a ledger. We can register her under territorial protection. Makes her a ward of the settlement until she's 18. Means nobody can claim her, buy her, or force her into anything. She'd be free. Free. The word hung in the air like something impossible. What's the catch? Lena asked. The sheriff almost smiled. No catch. You'd need to work. We don't support idleness, but you'd be paid fair wages, given a place to stay, and protected by law. It's not perfect, but it's a damn sight better than being property. Lena looked at Rowan. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. It's your choice, he said quietly. Choice. Another impossible word. Lena thought about the cabin in the mountains, the routine she'd built, the strange, silent man who'd somehow given her more than her own father ever had. She thought about going back there, living in fear, waiting for men like Carson to return. Then she thought about staying here, building something new, being free. I'll stay, she said. The sheriff nodded. Smart girl. She began filling out papers. Rowan stood to leave. Wait, Lena said. He turned. She wanted to thank him, wanted to ask if they'd see each other again, wanted to say something that would make sense of everything that had happened, but all she managed was, why didn't you tell me? That your father, that you understood. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Because it wasn't about me, he said finally. It was about giving you a chance I never got. He walked out. Lena stood there watching him go, feeling something crack open in her chest. The sheriff's voice pulled her back. He's a good man, the sheriff said quietly. Broken, but good. You were lucky. Lucky. Lena wasn't sure about that, but she was alive, and she was free. That had to count for something. The settlement gave her a room above the general store, small, clean, hers. She worked in the store during the day, learning inventory and accounts. At night, she studied with the school teacher, catching up on reading and writing and arithmetic. The first week was hard. She kept expecting someone to come take it all away, kept expecting to wake up back in her father's rented room or on the auction platform, or in some nightmare worse than both. But nobody came. The days passed. She got stronger, smarter, more certain, and slowly, Lena Cross began to understand what freedom actually meant. It meant choosing when to wake up. It meant earning money that was hers. It meant saying no. It meant building something that couldn't be sold. 2 months after arriving, she was sitting outside the general store when she saw a familiar wagon rolling down the main street. Her heart jumped. Rowan. He pulled up in front of the store, climbed down slowly, looked at her. You're still here, he said. Didn't. He said. Where else would I be? He almost smiled. Thought maybe you'd have moved on, found something better. This is better. They stood there awkwardly, two people who'd shared something profound but didn't know how to talk about it. I came to bring you something, Rowan said finally. He reached into the wagon and pulled out a small wooden box, handed it to her. Inside were her mother's things, a hairbrush, a locket, a worn Bible, a few letters. Found them in your father's room, Rowan said. Figured you'd want them. Lena's eyes burned. How did you? Convinced him to part with them. The way he said it made clear that convinced involved more than conversation. Thank you, Lena whispered. Rowan nodded, turned to leave. Wait, Lena said. Would you want to stay for supper? The boarding house serves at 6. It's not good, but it's food. He looked at her surprised. You don't owe me anything. I know, I'm asking anyway. Rowan stood there, clearly uncomfortable with the whole concept of socialization. Then, slowly, he nodded. 6, he said. 6, Lena confirmed. He walked away to stable his horses. Lena sat there, holding her mother's things, and let herself cry. Not from sadness, from something else. Something that felt like the first breath after drowning. She'd been sold. She'd been terrified. She'd been saved by someone more broken than she was. And now she was free. It wasn't the ending she'd expected, but it was the beginning of something better. The beginning of choosing her own life. Supper at the boarding house was exactly as advertised. Not good, but food. Watery stew, bread that had seen better days, coffee strong enough to strip paint. Lena and Rowan sat at a corner table, the only two people in the dining room who weren't talking. Around them, the settlement's residents chattered about claims and weather, and whose daughter was courting whose son. Normal things. The kind of things Lena was still learning to care about. Rowan ate methodically, eyes on his plate. He looked deeply uncomfortable, like sitting in a room full of people was a form of torture he'd agreed to for reasons he couldn't quite remember. "You don't have to stay," Lena said quietly. He looked up. "You asked me to." "I'm giving you an out. Don't want one." Lena almost smiled. For a man who lived alone in the mountains, he was stubbornly loyal to his word. "How's the cabin?" she asked. "Standing, cold, quiet." "You miss it?" Rowan considered this. "It's where I belong." "That's not what I asked." He met her eyes. "No, I don't miss it." The honesty surprised her, surprised him too, judging by the way he went back to his stew like it had personally offended him. "I got a job," Lena said, filling the silence. "At the store. Mr. Peterson's teaching me bookkeeping." "You're good at that?" "Getting better. Turns out numbers make more sense than people." Rowan almost smiled. "Yeah." They ate in companionable silence for a while. Then Lena asked the question that had been sitting in her chest since he'd arrived. "Why'd you really come back?" Rowan set down his spoon, stared at the table. "Had to know you were all right." "You could have asked anyone. Didn't have to see me." "Wanted to see for myself." Something in his voice made Lena's throat tight. This man who'd bought her freedom, who'd risked his life to get her here, who'd given her a chance when nobody else would. He'd come back just to make sure she was okay. "I am," she said softly. "All right, better than all right." Rowan nodded, looked relieved. "Good. You should visit more often." He shifted uncomfortably. "Not much for towns." "I noticed, but the offer stands." Rowan studied her for a long moment. Whatever he saw seemed to settle something in him. "Maybe I will," he said. It wasn't a promise, but coming from Rowan Hale, it was close enough. They finished eating. Rowan paid, wouldn't let Lena contribute despite her protests, and walked her back to the general store. The sun was setting, painting the settlement in shades of gold and copper. People were heading home, lighting lamps, settling in for the night. Normal, safe, free. At the store's entrance, Rowan stopped. "You did good," he said. "Coming here, starting over, takes guts." "Learn from the best," Lena said. Rowan looked confused. "Who?" "You." He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language, like the concept of being someone's example was completely alien to him, which Lena realized it probably was. "I'm nobody's best," he said quietly. "You're wrong." Before he could argue, Lena reached out and squeezed his hand, just once, brief. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Rowan's hand was calloused, scarred, trembling slightly. He looked at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what human contact felt like. Then he pulled away, nodded once, walked to his wagon without looking back. Lena watched him leave, feeling something settle in her chest. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition. They were the same, her and Rowan, broken things learning how to be whole. She went inside. Tomorrow she'd work. Learn, build. Tonight she'd sleep in her own bed, in her own room, safe. It was more than enough. The weeks folded into months. Lena worked 6 days a week at the general store, learning inventory management, customer service, basic accounting. Mr. Peterson was a patient teacher, gruff but fair. He paid her wages every Saturday, actual money, hers to keep, and never once asked for anything in return. It was the strangest arrangement Lena had ever experienced. Work that was just work, nothing hidden underneath. She sent half her wages to the settlement's education fund. The schoolteacher, Miss Sarah Chen, had offered to tutor her 3 evenings a week. Reading, writing, mathematics, history. Everything Lena's mother had started teaching her before the fever hit. "You're smart," Miss Chen said one evening, reviewing Lena's arithmetic homework. "Really smart. With proper education, you could do anything." Lena looked up from her slate. "Like what?" "Teaching, nursing, law, if you wanted. Women are starting to practice law in some territories." The idea seemed absurd. Girls like her didn't become lawyers. Girls like her got sold in town squares and considered themselves lucky to survive. But Miss Chen was serious. "You've got time, Lena. You're 16. By the time you're 20, you could have an education that opens real doors. 20 felt impossibly far away, but also close enough to imagine. I'll think about it, Lena said. Do more than think. Plan. That night, lying in her narrow bed above the store, Lena tried to picture her future, tried to see past survival into something bigger. It was hard, scary. The future had always been something that happened to her, not something she chose. But maybe that was changing. Maybe she was changing. Rowan came back 6 weeks later, then 2 months after that, then monthly, like clockwork. He'd arrive in the afternoon, help unload his furs and timber at the trading post, buy supplies, and then, awkwardly like he was forcing himself, find Lena at the store. They'd have supper at the boarding house. Talk about nothing important. Weather, crops, the goats at his cabin. Then he'd leave before dawn, back to his mountains. It became routine. Strange, but routine. He's courting you, Mr. Peterson said one day, not looking up from his ledger. Lena nearly dropped the jar she was shelving. What? No, we're just what? He rides 2 days to have bad stew with you once a month. That's courting. It's not like that. Mr. Peterson looked at her over his spectacles. What's it like then? Lena didn't have an answer. She didn't know what it was like. Rowan had never touched her beyond that one handshake months ago. Never said anything that could be mistaken for romantic. They barely talked, really, but he kept coming back. It's complicated, she said finally. Always is, Mr. Peterson said, and went back to his numbers. That night, Lena asked Rowan directly. They were sitting outside the boarding house, too full of terrible stew to move. The street was quiet. Stars were starting to appear. Why do you keep coming back? Lena asked. Rowan was silent for a long time. You want me to stop? No, I just want to understand. He stared at his hands. They were never clean anymore, Lena noticed. Perpetually stained with work, scarred, weathered. Spent 10 years in the army, Rowan said slowly, killing people I didn't know for reasons I didn't understand. Came home and spent another 10 alone, trying to forget. Thought that was all I was good for. Being alone. Being broken. He paused. Lena waited. Then I saw you on that platform, he continued. Saw your father selling you like you were nothing. And I thought, his voice caught. I thought, here's someone more broken than me. Someone who might understand. I'm not broken, Lena said quietly. Rowan looked at her. No, you're not. That's what I figured out. You were hurt, but you weren't broken. You healed, got stronger. He looked away. Made me think maybe I could too. Lena's chest felt tight. Is that what this is? You using me to fix yourself? No. The word was sharp, definite. I come back because you're the only person I've met in 20 years who doesn't look at me like I'm something to be feared. You just see me. And He stopped. Started again. I wanted to see you too. Make sure you were still okay, still free. It was the most he'd ever said at once. Lena could see the effort it cost him, laying himself open like that. I am free, she said. Because of you. No, you're free because you chose it. I just gave you the chance. They sat in silence, watching the settlement settle into night. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing a fiddle. The melody was sad and sweet. You could stay longer, Lena said. Next time, more than one night. Rowan shook his head. Wouldn't know what to do with myself. Learn, same as me. He looked at her like she'd suggested he sprout wings and fly. I'm serious, Lena said. You can't hide in those mountains forever. Eventually you'll have to... She stopped, searching for the right words. You'll have to come back to the world. What if I don't fit in the world anymore? Then you make your own space in it. That's what I'm doing. Rowan studied her face in the dim light. Something in his expression shifted. You really believe that, he said, that people can change? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? He nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. I am right. Confident. Getting there. Rowan almost smiled. Actually smiled, not just almost. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger. human. Good, he said. Confidence looks good on you. It was the closest he'd ever come to a compliment. Lena felt her face heat. They sat there until the cold drove them inside. Rowan walked her to the store, said goodnight, and left. But this time, Lena noticed, his shoulders looked a little less heavy. Winter came hard and fast. The settlement battened down, preparing for months of snow and cold. Lena bought warmer clothes with her saved wages. A real coat, wool socks, sturdy boots. Bought them herself. Chose them herself. The small victories were adding up. Rowan didn't come in November or December. The passes were snowed in, travel impossible. Lena told herself it was fine. He was safe in his cabin. She was safe here. They'd survived apart before. But she missed him, which was strange. You couldn't miss someone you barely knew, could you? Except she did know him. Knew the way he took his coffee. Knew he hated crowds. Knew he checked the locks 3 times before bed. Knew he'd killed people and it still haunted him. Knew he thought he was irredeemable, but kept trying anyway. She knew him better than she'd known most people in her life. January brought a thaw. The snow melted enough to make the roads passable. Lena found herself watching the main street, looking for a familiar wagon. He didn't come. February arrived. Still no Rowan. You worried about him? Miss Chen asked during one of their tutoring sessions. Lena had been staring at the same page for 10 minutes. No, maybe. I don't know. You could go check on him. Lena looked up, startled. What? Hire a guide, make the trip, see if he's all right. I can't just, Why not? You're free, remember? You can go where you want. The idea lodged in Lena's brain and wouldn't leave. She could go. She had money, had time, had a legitimate reason. But going back to those mountains felt like regression, like giving up the progress she'd made. Think about it, Miss Chen said. Sometimes moving forward means going back first. 3 days later, Lena was in the sheriff's office asking about guides. Sheriff Morrison looked amused. You planning an expedition? I need to check on someone. Up in the high country. Rowan Hale. Lena flushed. How did you... Small settlement. People talk. He hasn't been down in months, has he? No. Morrison leaned back in her chair. I'll be honest with you. That trail's dangerous this time of year. Thaw makes it unstable. Avalanches, rock slides, ice. Most guides won't take it. Then I'll go alone. You'll die. Maybe. But I have to know he's okay. Morrison studied her. You got feelings for this man? Lena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know what I have, but he saved my life. I owe him. You don't owe anyone anything. That's the whole point of being free. This isn't about debt. It's about... Lena struggled for the words. He's alone up there. Has been for years. And I know what that's like. Being alone. Nobody checking if you're okay. Nobody caring if you live or die. Morrison's expression softened. All right, I'll make you a deal. I've got a deputy who knows those mountains. He's making a patrol run next week. You can go with him, check on your friend, come back. But you follow his lead, no arguments. Deal? Deal. The deputy's name was Marcus Webb, early 30s, quiet, competent. He looked at Lena skeptically when Morrison explained the plan. She knows it's a hard ride, he asked. I can handle it, Lena said. It's not about handling it. It's about not dying. You ever ridden for 8 hours straight in snow? No. You ever dealt with altitude sickness? Frostbite? Getting lost in a whiteout? No, but I'm going anyway. Webb sighed. Stubborn. Determined. Same thing, different word. He looked at Morrison. She's your responsibility if this goes wrong. Noted, Morrison said. Try not to let it go wrong. They left at dawn the following Tuesday. 2 horses, enough supplies for a week, weapons Lena didn't know how to use but carried anyway. Webb set a brutal pace, pushing them hard before the afternoon clouds rolled in. Lena's thighs screamed, her back ached. The cold worked its way through every layer she wore. But she kept up. By nightfall, they'd made the first waypoint, a hunting shelter someone had built years ago. Webb got a fire going while Lena tended the horses with numb fingers. You did good today, Webb said, handing her coffee from a dented pot. Better than I expected. You expected me to fail. Expected you to quit. Different thing. Lena sipped the coffee. It tasted like dirt and salvation. I don't quit. I noticed. Webb poked at the fire. This man you're checking on, he worth all this? Lena thought about Rowan standing in the dry, hollow square, outbidding everyone. Thought about him teaching her to split wood, to read contracts, to defend herself. Thought about him saying she wasn't broken. Yes, she said. He's worth it. Webb nodded. Then we'll get you there. They reached the cabin 2 days later. The approach was exactly as Lena remembered. The clearing, the lean-to, the creek running somewhere close. But something was wrong. No smoke from the chimney, no tracks in the snow. Webb drew his rifle. Stay behind me. They approached cautiously. The door was closed, but not locked. Webb pushed it open. The cabin was freezing, dark, empty. Lena's heart sank. They were too late. Something had happened. Rowan was gone, or worse. Lena! She spun. Rowan stood in the doorway behind them, rifle in hand, looking like death. His face was gaunt, his eyes fever bright. He swayed where he stood. What are you doing here, huh? He asked. His voice was rough, wrong. Looking for you. You're sick. I'm fine. Then he collapsed. Webb caught him before he hit the floor. Together they dragged Rowan to the bed near the stove. He was burning up, mumbling incoherently. Fever, Webb said, checking him over. Bad one. He's been fighting it for days, looks like. Lena's hands shook as she built up the fire. What do we do? Keep him warm. Get fluids in him. Hope it breaks. Webb looked grim. If it doesn't, we'll have to get him down the mountain. In his condition, that might kill him. Then we make sure it breaks. They worked through the night. Lena brewed willow bark tea for the fever, forced water down Rowan's throat when he was conscious enough to swallow. Webb kept the fire going, monitored Rowan's breathing, checked his pulse. Rowan drifted in and out, sometimes lucid, mostly not. Once he grabbed Lena's wrist with surprising strength. You shouldn't be here, he mumbled. Not safe. I'm exactly where I need to be. Stubborn girl. Learned from you. He almost smiled. Then the fever took him under again. Dawn came. The fever hadn't broken. Rowan's breathing was shallow, labored. Webb pulled Lena aside. We need to decide, he said quietly. Stay and hope he recovers, or start moving him now while he's still strong enough to survive the trip. What are his chances either way? Staying? Maybe 50-50. Moving him? Worse. Lena looked at Rowan's unconscious form, thought about everything he'd done for her, everything he'd risked. We stay, she said. I didn't come all this way to give up on him now. Webb nodded. Then we stay. The second night was worse. Rowan's fever spiked. He thrashed, calling out names Lena didn't recognize, fighting battles that had ended years ago. She held him down when he got violent, whispered reassurances when he got scared. You're safe, she told him. You're home. The war's over. Never over, he mumbled. Never stops. It stops now. You hear me? It stops. Near midnight, something changed. Rowan went still. Too still. Lena's heart stopped. Then he took a deep, shuddering breath. His eyes opened, clear, lucid. Lena? His voice was barely a whisper. I'm here. You came. Of course I came. He closed his eyes. Stupid, dangerous. Yeah, well, you're worth it. When she looked again, he was asleep. Real sleep, not fever dreams. His breathing was steady. The crisis had passed. Webb checked his pulse and grinned. Fever's breaking, he's going to make it. Lena sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. Adrenaline drained out of her, leaving her hollow. She'd done it, saved him, the same way he'd saved her. Stubborn, Webb said, echoing his earlier assessment, but effective. That going on my tombstone, if you're lucky. They stayed 3 more days while Rowan recovered. He was weak, embarrassed, and deeply uncomfortable with being taken care of. Classic Rowan. You didn't have to come, he said on the 4th day, sitting up for the first time. Lena handed him broth. We've had this conversation. Drink. He drank, made a face. It's terrible. It's medicinal. Shut up and finish it. Webb watched them from across the room, grinning. You two are something else. What's that supposed to mean? Lena asked. Nothing. Just an observation. When Rowan was strong enough to travel, they made the trip back together. Slower this time, accounting for his weakness. He protested constantly but followed orders. Mostly. At the settlement, Sheriff Morrison took one look at Rowan and assigned him a room at the boarding house. You're staying until you're fully recovered, she said. Non-negotiable. I don't need... Wasn't asking. Rowan looked at Lena. She always this bossy? You have no idea. So Rowan stayed. Days turned into a week turned into 2. He helped around the settlement when he was strong enough, fixing things, hauling supplies, making himself useful. People got used to seeing him, stopped crossing the street when he walked by. He started talking to people. Not much, but more than before. And every evening, he and Lena had supper together, talked about their days, made plans. You could stay, Lena said one night. Permanently. There's work here. People. Rowan was quiet for a long time. I don't know how to live around people anymore. You're doing it now. This is temporary. Doesn't have to be. He looked at her, really looked at her. What are you asking, Lena? She took a breath. I'm asking if you want to try. Try being part of something instead of separate from it. Try building something instead of just surviving. With you? If you want. Rowan stared at his hands, those scarred, weathered hands that had killed and built and saved. I wouldn't know where to start, he said finally. Start here. Start now. Start small. He looked up, met her eyes. Okay, he said quietly. I'll try. It wasn't a promise, wasn't a declaration. But coming from Rowan Hale, it was everything. They'd both been sold, both been broken, both been convinced they were beyond saving. And now they were here, free, together, building something new from the wreckage of their pasts. It wasn't perfect, wasn't easy, but it was theirs, and that made it worth everything. Rowan's trying lasted exactly 3 weeks before the first real test came. It arrived in the form of Thomas Cross. Lena was at the general store, teaching a customer how to calculate board feet for a construction project, when the door opened and her father walked in. She knew it was him before she looked up, knew from the way the room went quiet, from the particular quality of silence that said something bad had just entered. He looked worse than she remembered. Thinner, grayer. His clothes hung on him like he'd borrowed them from a bigger man. But his eyes were the same, calculating, desperate, looking for an angle. Lena, he said, like they were old friends, like he hadn't sold her 9 months ago. Her hands went numb. The pencil she'd been holding clattered to the counter. Mr. Peterson stepped forward. Mr. Cross, didn't expect to see you here. Just passing through, wanted to check on my daughter. She's not your daughter anymore, Peterson said flatly. You made that clear when you sold her. Thomas's jaw tightened. That was a misunderstanding, a temporary arrangement until times got better. That's not how it works, and you know it. Lena found her voice. It came out steadier than she felt. What do you want? Thomas looked at her. Something flickered in his face. Shame, maybe, or just calculation wearing a mask. To apologize, he said. What I did was wrong. I was desperate, not thinking straight, but I've had time to reflect and I want to make it right. Make it right. Lena's laugh was sharp, bitter. How exactly do you make selling your daughter right? By taking you home, back to Dry Hollow. We've got a room now, a better situation. You could... No. The word cut through the store like a gunshot. Thomas stopped, blinked. Lena, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. The answer is no. I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm your father. You were my father. You gave up that right when you put me on a platform and traded me for supplies. Thomas's expression hardened. You're still a minor. I have legal claim. Mr. Peterson laughed, actually laughed. You want to talk legal claim? She's a registered ward of the territorial settlement. Means you got no claim at all. Now get out of my store before I have the sheriff remove you. Thomas didn't move. His eyes were locked on Lena, and she could see him thinking, planning. He'd come here for a reason, and it wasn't to apologize. "I heard you're doing well," he said slowly. "Working, earning wages. That's good, real good. But you should know, I got debts, serious ones. Men who don't take kindly to waiting. Not my problem." It could be. These men, they know about you. Know you're here, know you're earning. They're thinking maybe a daughter should help her father out of a tight spot. The threat was clear. Lena felt ice spread through her chest. "Get out," she said quietly. "Lena, get out before I scream." Thomas stood there a moment longer. Then he turned and walked out, but his parting words hung in the air like smoke. "This isn't over." The door closed. Lena's legs gave out. She caught herself on the counter, breathing hard. Peterson was beside her immediately. "You all right?" "No, yes, I don't know." She looked up at him. "He's going to cause trouble." "Let him try. We've got law here. He can't touch you." But Lena knew better. Law only worked when people followed it. Men like her father, men desperate enough, didn't care about law. She had to tell Rowan. She found him at the livery stable, helping repair a broken wagon wheel. He looked up when she approached, saw her face, and immediately set down his tools. "What happened?" "My father's here." Rowan went very still. "Where?" "He was at the store. Left about 20 minutes ago." Lena quickly explained the conversation, the threats, the implications. Rowan listened without interrupting. When she finished, his expression was dark. "He's testing," Rowan said. "Seeing if you'll break. Seeing if there's money to be squeezed out of you." "What do I do?" "You stay visible. Stay around people. Don't go anywhere alone." He paused. "And you let me handle your father." "Rowan, I mean it, Lena. You've worked too hard to let him drag you back into his mess. I'll talk to him. Make sure he understands the situation." "What if talking doesn't work?" Rowan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then I'll make him understand a different way." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept seeing her father's face, kept hearing his words. "These men know about you. They're thinking maybe a daughter should help." She thought she was free, thought the distance, the legal protection, the new life would be enough. But freedom wasn't a destination you reached and then relaxed. It was something you had to defend, every day, against everyone who wanted to take it from you. Around midnight, she heard voices outside, angry voices. She crept to the window and looked down. Rowan and Thomas stood in the street, facing each other. Too far away to hear clearly, but their body language told the story. Thomas gesturing, arguing. Rowan standing like stone, arms crossed. Then Rowan said something, just a few words, too quiet to carry, and Thomas stepped back. His face went white even in the dim moonlight. He said something else, voice rising, but Rowan didn't respond, just stared until Thomas turned and walked away. Rowan stayed in the street for a long moment, watching Thomas go. Then he looked up at Lena's window. Their eyes met. He nodded once, "It's handled," and walked away into the darkness. Lena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The next morning, Thomas Cross was gone, left before dawn, according to the stable hand who'd seen him ride out. Lena felt relief and dread in equal measure. Relief that he was gone, dread that he'd be back. "What did you say to him?" she asked Rowan over breakfast. "Truth." "Which was?" Rowan was quiet for a moment, staring at his coffee. That if he ever came near you again, he'd regret it. That the men he owed could collect from him, not you. And that if he sent anyone else to cause trouble, I'd make sure they never found their way back down the mountain. Lena's stomach twisted. "You threatened him. I promised him. There's a difference?" "Yeah, a promise is something I keep." They ate in silence for a while. Then Lena asked the question that had been nagging her since last night. "You think he'll listen? Really?" Rowan met her eyes. "Your father's a coward. Cowards listen when they're scared, and I made sure he was scared." Should have made Lena feel better. It didn't, because violence, even threatened violence, felt like a step backward, like regression into the world she was trying to leave behind. "I don't want you to become someone you're not because of me," she said quietly. "I'm not becoming anyone. I'm just being what I've always been." Rowan's voice was flat. "The difference is now I'm using it for something that matters." And what's that? He looked at her. You. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning Lena wasn't ready to examine. She changed the subject. Sheriff Morrison wants to see us, both of us. She sent word this morning. Rowan nodded. Then we better go. Morrison's office smelled like coffee and old leather. The sheriff sat behind her desk, looking tired. A stranger stood by the window, well-dressed, out of place in the frontier settlement. Lena, Rowan, this is Mr. Edmund Vance. He's a territorial magistrate. Morrison gestured to the chairs. Sit. They sat. Lena's stomach was in knots. Vance turned from the window. He was middle-aged, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that had seen too much to be easily impressed. Miss Cross, he said, I've been reviewing your case, your registration as a territorial ward. Is there a problem? Lena asked. Not a problem. A complication. Vance pulled papers from his satchel. Your father has filed a petition with the territorial court. He's claiming that your sale was illegal under territorial law, and therefore the subsequent protections granted to you are invalid. The room tilted. Lena gripped the armrest. But he's the one who sold me. I'm aware of the irony, Vance said dryly. Nevertheless, he's found a lawyer willing to argue the case. They're claiming that because you were a minor, your father couldn't legally transfer custody without proper court oversight. Therefore, the transaction was void. Therefore, you remain under his legal guardianship until you reach majority. That's insane, Rowan said. His voice was dangerous. He sold her. He can't just claim it didn't happen because it's convenient. I agree, but law and sense don't always align. Vance looked at Lena. If the court agrees with his petition, you could be compelled to return to his custody. No. Lena's voice shook. I won't. I'll run first. Running makes you a fugitive, gives him more legal ammunition. Morrison leaned forward. We need to fight this properly, in court, with evidence. What kind of evidence, Vass? Lena asked. Witnesses to the sale, documentation of the transaction, testimony about his unfitness as a guardian. Vance ticked off items on his fingers. The stronger our case, the better chance we have of the court dismissing his petition. I'll testify, Rowan said immediately. I was there. I saw everything. Your testimony will help, but you're also the person who benefited from the transaction. The court may view you as biased. Vance looked at Lena. We need independent witnesses, people from Dry Hollow who saw what happened. Lena's mind raced. Who would testify? Who would risk crossing her father, risk getting involved in a legal battle that didn't concern them? The sheriff in Dry Hollow, she said slowly. He was there that day. Didn't stop it, but he saw it. Good. Anyone else? The assay office clerk, the men who bid. They'd have to admit they tried to buy a person, but they'd also prove the transaction happened, Vance finished. That's useful. We'll need to track them down, get statements. How long do we have? Morrison asked. Hearing is set for 3 weeks. That's not much time. 3 weeks. 21 days to gather evidence, build a case, prove that she deserved to be free, to prove that her father had no right to drag her back into hell. Lena felt the weight of it pressing down. She'd thought the hard part was over, thought she'd escaped, but freedom, apparently, was something you had to win over and over again. We'll do it, she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Whatever it takes. Vance nodded. Then we start now. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Vance worked with Morrison to track down witnesses. Some were willing to testify. Others refused. Didn't want trouble. Didn't want to get involved. Had their own reasons for staying silent. The assay clerk agreed reluctantly. So did the land claims recorder. But most of the men who'd bid that day had moved on, scattered to other claims, other towns, other lives. Rowan made a trip back to Dry Hollow, came back with statements from 3 witnesses, including the bartender at the Rusty Bell, who'd watched the whole thing from his porch. How'd you convince them? Lena asked nicely. And if they'd said no? Rowan's expression was unreadable. They didn't say no. Lena didn't push. She was learning that some things Rowan did were better left unexamined. His methods might be questionable, but his results spoke for themselves. Miss Chen helped Lena prepare her own testimony. They spent hours going over what happened, what to say, how to say it, how to present herself as credible, sympathetic, worthy of protection. You're going to be asked hard questions, Chen warned, about why you didn't resist, why you didn't run. The opposing lawyer will try to make it seem like you went willingly. I didn't have a choice. I know that. You know that, but you'll have to make the court understand. Chen squeezed her hand. Tell your story simply, honestly. Don't embellish, don't minimize, just truth. Truth. Lena had spent so long trying to escape her truth that the idea of laying it bare in front of strangers made her sick, but there was no other way. The night before the hearing, Lena couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She sat in her room, staring at the walls, trying to imagine what tomorrow would bring. A knock on her door. She opened it to find Rowan standing there, looking uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" he asked. Lena stepped aside. Rowan entered, took in the sparse room, bed, dresser, one chair, nothing personal. She hadn't accumulated much, hadn't felt permanent enough to try. "You okay?" he asked. "No, terrified." "Good. You should be. Fear keeps you sharp." "That's supposed to be comforting?" Rowan almost smiled. "No, this is—" He pulled something from his coat, a folded paper, handed it to her. Lena unfolded it. It was a deed. To land. 40 acres in the high country, legally registered to Rowan Hale. "I don't understand," she said. "If things go wrong tomorrow," Rowan said quietly, "if the court rules against you, you run. You go to that land. It's remote enough that nobody will find you. Cabin's rough, but livable. There's water, game, enough to survive. You're giving me your land? I'm giving you a backup plan. A way out if the law fails you." Lena stared at the deed. This paper represented everything Rowan owned, everything he'd built, and he was handing it to her like it was nothing. "I can't take this, she said. "You're not taking it. I'm offering it. There's a difference." Rowan's voice was firm. "You saved my life, Lena. Came up that mountain when you didn't have to, risked everything to make sure I was okay. This is me returning the favor. It's too much. It's exactly enough." He met her eyes. "You deserve to be free. If the court won't give you that, then we'll take it another way. Whatever it takes." Lena's throat was tight. "Why do you care so much? Really?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "Because for the first time in 20 years, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Like my life means something beyond just survival." He looked away. "You gave me that. Let me give you this." Lena folded the deed carefully, put it in her pocket, stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Rowan went rigid, clearly had no idea what to do with physical affection, but slowly, tentatively, his arms came up, held her back. They stood there in the dim room, two broken people holding each other up, and for just a moment everything else fell away. The fear, the uncertainty, the looming court date. None of it mattered. Just this. Just them. "Thank you," Lena whispered. Rowan nodded against her hair. "We'll get through this. Promise?" "Promise." The territorial courthouse was a 2-story building on the edge of the settlement, newer than most structures, built from milled lumber instead of logs. Inside was a single courtroom with wooden benches, a judge's bench, and large windows that let in cold morning light. Lena sat at the front with Vance and Morrison. Across the aisle, her father sat with his lawyer, a slick-looking man named Hartwell who'd ridden in from the territorial capital. Behind Lena, the benches were surprisingly full. People from the settlement had come. Mr. Peterson, Miss Chen, Webb, the deputy who'd helped her find Rowan. Even some customers from the store. They'd come to support her, to witness. Rowan sat in the back, face impassive, but Lena could feel his presence like an anchor. The judge entered, a woman, older, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Judge Catherine Brennan. Morrison had briefed Lena. Brennan was fair but rigid, followed the law to the letter, didn't care about sentiment, only facts. "All rise, the bailiff called. They rose, sat when instructed. Lena's heart was trying to escape her chest. Brennan looked over the room. This is a petition hearing regarding the custody status of Lena Cross, currently a registered ward of the territorial settlement. Mr. Hartwell, you're representing the petitioner. Proceed. Hartwell stood. He was good. Lena could tell immediately. Confident, polished, the kind of lawyer who knew how to work a courtroom. Your Honor, this case is simple. Thomas Cross is the natural father of Lena Cross. Under territorial law, he holds legal guardianship until she reaches majority at age 18. The so-called sale that occurred 9 months ago was illegal. You cannot sell a human being in this territory. Therefore, any subsequent actions based on that illegal transaction are null and void. Mr. Vance? Brennan looked at him. Vance stood. Your Honor, opposing counsel is correct that you cannot legally sell a person, but that's precisely why Miss Cross was granted ward status, to protect her from the illegal actions of her father. Mr. Thomas Cross willingly, publicly, and with full knowledge traded his daughter for material goods. That he now claims the transaction was illegal doesn't absolve him of attempting it. It indicts him. So you're arguing he should be punished, not granted custody? Brennan asked. I'm arguing he's demonstrated unfitness as a guardian and should have no legal claim to his daughter. Hartwell jumped in. Unfitness is a serious allegation, requires serious proof. My client made a mistake in desperate circumstances. That doesn't make him unfit. He sold his daughter, Vance said flatly. He arranged a work placement. He put her on a platform and traded her like livestock. The judge held up a hand. Gentlemen, I'll hear testimony and make my own determination. Mr. Hartwell, call your first witness. Thomas Cross took the stand. Watching her father swear to tell the truth made Lena's stomach turn. He looked different in court, smaller, older, almost sympathetic. He'd cleaned up, trimmed his beard, wore clothes that didn't hang on him quite so badly. Hartwell led him through his testimony. The story Thomas told was carefully crafted. Yes, he'd arranged for Lena to work for Rowan Hale. Yes, he'd received compensation, payment for releasing her from his household so she could earn her own way. But it wasn't a sale, it was an arrangement, a chance for Lena to better herself. He'd been desperate, he admitted. Times were hard. But he'd always intended to check on her, to make sure she was safe. And when he'd heard she was doing well in the settlement, he'd been proud. Proud that she'd taken the opportunity he'd given her and made something of herself. It was a masterful performance. Lena wanted to scream. Vance's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Cross, you testified that you arranged a work placement for your daughter. Is that correct? Yes. And you received $75 in exchange? As payment for… Yes or no, Mr. Cross, did you receive money? Thomas hesitated. Yes. Did you ask your daughter if she wanted this arrangement? She knew times were hard. Yes or no? No, I didn't ask. Did you give her any choice in the matter? There wasn't time to… Yes or no, Mr. Cross? Thomas's jaw tightened. No. So you made a decision about your daughter's life without consulting her, received payment for it, and sent her off with a stranger. Is that accurate? When you say it like that, I'm saying it the way it happened. Is that accurate? Yes. Vance paused. Let that sit. Then, Mr. Cross, why are you here today? Thomas blinked. What? Why are you petitioning for custody now? You didn't check on your daughter for 9 months. Didn't write, didn't visit, didn't send money. So why now? Because I realized I made a mistake, because I miss her, because she's my daughter. Or because you have debts and she has income? Hartwell shot to his feet. Objection, speculation. Sustained, Brennan said. Mr. Vance, stick to facts. I'll rephrase. Mr. Cross, do you currently owe money? Thomas shifted. Everyone owes somebody. How much? I don't see how that's relevant. Answer the question, Brennan said. Thomas's face went red. About $300. $300? And your daughter earns wages working at the general store, doesn't she? I suppose. Do you intend, if granted custody, to have her contribute to paying your debts? A daughter should help her father. Yes or no? Yes. The courtroom murmured. Brennan's expression didn't change, but Lena saw her make a note. Vance continued. Mr. Cross, after you left your daughter with Mr. Hale, did you verify she was safe? I trusted. Yes or no? No. Did you know where Mr. Hale lived? The mountains somewhere. Did you know anything about him, his character, his reputation? He seemed. Yes or no? No. So you sent your 16-year-old daughter into the wilderness with a complete stranger, took money for it, and didn't bother to check if she was alive or dead for 9 months. Is that correct? Thomas was sweating now. I knew she'd be fine. How did you know? I had a feeling. A feeling. Your Honor, I'm done with this witness. Thomas stepped down, looked at Lena as he passed. She didn't look back. Hartwell called 2 character witnesses, men from Dry Hollow, who testified that Thomas was a hard worker, a good neighbor, just down on his luck. Vance tore them apart on cross-examination, getting them to admit they didn't know about the sale, wouldn't have approved if they had. Then it was Lena's turn. She walked to the stand on legs that didn't feel connected to her body, swore her oath, sat. The courtroom was too hot, too bright. Every eye was on her. Vance started gentle. Miss Cross, can you tell us what happened on the day in question? In your own words. Lena took a breath, started talking, told it simply, like Chen had taught her, waking up to her father's boots on the stairs, the dress, the platform, the crowd, the bidding, the fear. I thought I was going to die, she said quietly. Or worse, I thought my life was over. Did your father explain what was happening? He said I cost more than I was worth, that he needed to find me a situation. Did you want to go with Mr. Hale? I didn't want to go with anyone, but I didn't have a choice. What did you think would happen? Lena's throat was tight. I thought he'd hurt me, use me. That's what happens to girls who get sold. Did he? No, he gave me work, gave me space, taught me things, treated me like, she paused, like I was a person. Hartwell's cross-examination was designed to shake her. Miss Cross, you testified that you had no choice, but you could have run, couldn't you? Run where? Anywhere. Back to town, into the desert, somewhere. I would have died. But you had the option. You chose to go with Mr. Hale. That's not a choice. That's survival. You also testified that Mr. Hale treated you well, gave you work, taught you things. Sounds like your father made a good decision. Lena's hands clenched. My father sold me. How I ended up doesn't make that okay. But you're better off now than you were then, aren't you? You have a job, education, opportunities. Things you wouldn't have had if you'd stayed with your father. That's not because of my father. That's despite him. But the result is I got lucky. I could have ended up dead or worse, and my father wouldn't have cared as long as he got his $75. Hartwell paused, changed tactics. Miss Cross, do you hate your father? Lena looked at him, then at her father, sitting across the aisle, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. No, she said quietly. I don't hate him. I just don't trust him. And I don't want to be owned by him. Owned is a strong word. It's the right word. When Lena stepped down, she felt emptied out, raw. She told her truth. Whether it was enough remained to be seen. Rowan testified next, described the sale exactly as it happened, described finding Lena terrified and convinced she was going to be hurt, described teaching her to survive, to defend herself, to be strong. Hartwell tried to paint him as predatory, a strange man buying a girl, keeping her isolated. But Rowan's flat honesty was unshakable. I bought her to save her, he said simply. Knew what men like that would do, couldn't let it happen. Very noble. And what did you get out of it? Rowan looked at Hartwell like he was an idiot. Help around the cabin, someone to talk to, a reason to give a damn about staying alive. That enough? The other witnesses testified. The assay clerk, the bartender, the land recorder, all painted the same picture. Thomas Cross had publicly sold his daughter. No ambiguity, no mistake. When the testimony was done, Brennan called for closing arguments. Hartwell argued law. Thomas Cross was the legal father, the sale was illegal, Therefore, his rights remained intact. Mistakes shouldn't cost a man his family. Vance argued justice. Thomas Cross had demonstrated profound unfitness. He'd endangered his daughter, profited from it, and was now trying to profit again. Law existed to protect people, not enable their abusers. Brennan listened to both, made notes, then looked up. "I'll render my decision now," she said. The courtroom went silent. Brennan looked at Thomas. "Mr. Cross, what you did was reprehensible. You sold your daughter. I don't care what words you used to dress it up. Sale, arrangement, placement. You traded a human being for money. That you now claim the transaction was illegal doesn't absolve you. It indicts you." Thomas's face went white. Brennan looked at Lena. "Miss Cross, you've demonstrated remarkable resilience. You've built a life for yourself against considerable odds. The court recognizes your right to continue that life without interference." She paused. Lena's heart stopped. "However, the law is the law. And technically, Mr. Hartwell is correct. Mr. Cross retains legal guardianship until you reach majority." "No, no, no, no." "That said," Brennan continued, "I find that Mr. Cross has demonstrated such profound unfitness as a guardian that his rights should be terminated immediately. His petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm issuing a permanent restraining order. Mr. Cross, you are not to contact, approach, or communicate with your daughter in any way. Violation will result in arrest and prosecution. Are we clear?" Thomas sat frozen. Hartwell whispered urgently in his ear. "Mr. Cross?" Brennan's voice was sharp. "Are we clear?" "Yes," Thomas said. His voice was hollow. "Clear. Good. This hearing is concluded." The gavel fell. For a moment, Lena couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then it hit her. She'd won. She was free. Actually, legally, permanently free. Morrison was hugging her. Vance was shaking her hand. Miss Chen was crying. The courtroom erupted in noise and motion, and Lena stood in the center of it, feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. She looked for Rowan, found him standing at the back, watching her with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. Pride. Lena pushed through the crowd, reached him. "We did it," she said. "You did it," Rowan corrected. "I just helped." "You did more than help. You—" Words failed. She grabbed his hand instead, squeezed hard. Rowan squeezed back. "You're free, Lena. Really free. What are you going to do with it?" Lena looked around the courtroom, at the people who'd supported her, fought for her, believed in her. Looked at Rowan, this broken man who'd saved her and let her save him back. "I'm gonna live," she said. "Really live. Not just survive. Live." Rowan smiled, actually smiled, full and genuine and transformative. "Yeah, he said. "You are." Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining. Lena stood on the steps, breathing in air that tasted like freedom, and let herself believe it. She was no longer property, no longer trapped, no longer someone's daughter or burden or problem. She was just Lena Cross, and that was enough. The celebration lasted exactly 2 hours before reality set back in. The settlement threw an impromptu gathering at the boarding house. Nothing fancy, just people sharing food and whiskey and relief that justice had actually worked for once. Lena found herself passed from person to person, accepting congratulations from neighbors she barely knew, from customers who'd watched her grow over the past year. But underneath the joy, something gnawed at her, a restlessness she couldn't name. She found Rowan outside, leaning against the porch railing, watching the stars emerge. He'd slipped out during the toasts, uncomfortable with the attention as always. "You okay?" she asked. "Should be asking you that." "I'm fine. Better than fine." She leaned beside him. "So why don't I feel different?" Rowan was quiet for a moment. "Because you've been free for a while now. The court just made it official." "Then why did I need the court at all?" "Because freedom's fragile, needs protection, needs documentation. Otherwise, people like your father can take it away whenever they want." He glanced at her. "Now they can't. That's worth something." Lena nodded, but the restlessness remained. She'd won the fight. So why did it feel like something was ending instead of beginning? "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what do I do with all this freedom? I've spent a year just trying to survive, to prove I could make it. Now I've made it. So what comes next? Rowan considered this. Whatever you want? That's not helpful. It's honest. He turned to face her fully. You're 17 now. You've got skills, education, a place in this community. The world's opening up. You could stay here, work at the store, build a quiet life, or you could do something else. Like what? Like anything. Teaching, nursing. You could move to a city, get more education. Miss Chen thinks you're smart enough for university, if you wanted. University. The word felt foreign. Universities were for rich kids, for boys with futures already mapped out, not for girls who'd been sold in town squares. That's crazy, Lena said. Is it? You learned bookkeeping in 6 months. You're reading at a level most adults never reach. You've got a mind that doesn't quit. Rowan's voice was firm. Only thing stopping you is you. Lena stared at the stars, feeling something crack open in her chest, fear and possibility mixing together. What if I fail? Then you fail, and you try something else. Rowan shrugged. Failure's not the end of the world. Giving up without trying is. You sound like Miss Chen. She's a smart woman. They stood in comfortable silence. Inside, someone started playing a fiddle. Laughter drifted out. What about you? Lena asked. What are you going to do? Rowan's expression shuddered. What I've always done. Work. Survive. That's not enough anymore. Why not? Because you're not just surviving anymore either. You've been living here for months. You've made friends, or at least people who don't cross the street when they see you. You could build something. I've got my cabin. That cabin's a tomb. You said it yourself. You went there to hide from the world. But you're not hiding anymore. Rowan's jaw tightened. Maybe I should go back to it. The words hit Lena like a slap. What? You're safe now. Got your freedom. Don't need me watching over you anymore. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Makes sense for me to head back to the mountains. Let you get on with your life. Panic flared in Lena's chest. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. Like hell it doesn't. Lena grabbed his arm, forced him to look at her. You don't get to make that decision alone. Not when... She stopped, searching for words. Not when you matter to me. Rowan stared at her. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. Lena, no, listen. You've spent a year teaching me that I'm worth something, that I deserve to choose my own path, but you don't get to turn around and make choices for me. If you want to leave, fine. But don't do it because you think I don't need you. Do you? Need me? The question hung between them, raw and honest. Lena realized she was still gripping his arm, realized how close they were standing, realized that somewhere in the past year, this strange, broken man had become essential to her in ways she didn't fully understand. Yes, she said quietly, I need you. Maybe not the way I did at the beginning, but I need you here. Need to know you're okay. She faltered. I need you in my life, Rowan. Whatever that looks like. Rowan's hand came up, hesitated, then gently touched her face. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. I don't know how to do this, he said. Be close to someone, care about someone. I've spent 20 years alone for a reason. What reason? Because everyone I've ever cared about either died or left. Easier to not care at all. Lena covered his hand with hers. I'm not leaving, and I'm not dying anytime soon if I can help it. You don't know that. Neither do you. But you can't live your whole life afraid of losing things. Sometimes you have to risk it. Rowan looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying. When did you get so brave? Learned from the best. He almost smiled. Then slowly, carefully, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. Not a kiss. Something more intimate than that. A moment of complete trust, complete vulnerability. They stood there, breathing together, while the party continued inside and the stars wheeled overhead. I'll stay, Rowan said finally. For now, if you want me to. I want you to. Then I'll stay. It wasn't a promise of forever, but it was enough. The next morning, Miss Chen arrived at the store with a stack of papers and a determined expression. "We need to talk," she said, pulling Lena aside. They sat in the back room, surrounded by crates and inventory. Chen spread the papers across a barrel. "These are applications," she said, "to the Territorial Women's Academy in the capital. They offer accelerated programs, 2 years of intensive study in teaching, nursing, or law. Full scholarships available for qualified students." Lena stared at the papers like they might bite. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you're qualified, more than qualified." Chen's eyes were bright with conviction. "Lena, you're brilliant. You pick up concepts in weeks that take others months. You could do something with that, something big. I work at a store." "You work at a store now. Doesn't mean you have to forever." Chen leaned forward. "I know this is scary. I know you've built a life here and it feels safe. But safe isn't the same as fulfilled. You could change things, Lena. Help other girls like you. Make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to them." The words resonated somewhere deep. Lena thought about the platform in Dry Hollow. Thought about how many other girls stood on platforms like that, in towns like that, with no one to save them. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said quietly. "Nobody's ever ready. You just do it anyway." Chen pushed the papers toward her. "Read them. Think about it. Applications are due in 6 weeks. If you decide you want this, I'll help you." After Chen left, Lena sat with the papers for a long time, reading about curricula and requirements and opportunities, trying to imagine herself in a classroom, in a uniform, learning law or medicine or pedagogy. It felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. That evening, she showed the papers to Rowan. He read through them carefully, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he looked at her. "You should do this," he said. "You don't think it's crazy?" "I think it's exactly what you should do." He tapped the law program description. "Says here they're looking for students who understand frontier justice, who've experienced the system firsthand. That's you. It's 2 years in the capital. That's far." "Yeah. And expensive, even with a scholarship. I'd have to work while studying." "You've done harder things." Lena looked at him. "You want me to go?" "I want you to have choices, real ones." Rowan's voice was steady. "You could stay here forever, work at the store, build a quiet life. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think it's what you're meant for." "What am I meant for?" "More. You're meant for more." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "What about you? About us?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "If there's an us, it'll survive 2 years. And if it doesn't, then it wasn't meant to be in the first place." He reached across the table, took her hand. "I'm not going anywhere, Lena. I'll be here. Or at the cabin. Wherever you need me to be. But you can't build your life around me. You have to build it around you." "That's terrifying." "I know." He squeezed her hand. "Do it anyway." The application process was brutal. Lena spent 3 weeks writing essays, gathering recommendations, documenting her education and work history. Mr. Peterson wrote a glowing letter about her aptitude for business. Miss Chen detailed her academic progress. Sheriff Morrison provided a statement about her character and resilience. Rowan helped her practice for the interview portion, asking hard questions until Lena wanted to throw things at him. "Why do you want to study law?" he asked for the 10th time. "Because I'm tired of answering this question." "Wrong answer. Try again." Lena took a breath, tried to find the truth underneath her frustration. "Because I know what it's like when the law fails you, when you're powerless and scared and nobody with authority cares. I want to change that. Want to be the person who stands up for people who can't stand up for themselves." Rowan nodded. "Better. Mean it when you say it." "I do mean it." "Then show them you mean it." The interview was scheduled for late March in the capital. Lena would have to travel 3 days by stage, stay overnight, and travel 3 days back. She'd never been that far from the settlement. The night before she left, she couldn't sleep. She paced her room, mentally reviewing everything she wanted to say, everything that could go wrong. A knock on her door. "Rowan. Thought you might need this." he said, holding out a small leather journal. For the trip. Writing helps when your brain won't shut up. Lena took it. The leather was soft, well made. Where did you get this? Made it. Well, the leather part. Peterson helped with the binding. She opened it. The pages were blank, waiting. On the inside cover, Rowan had written something in his careful, unpracticed handwriting. You're braver than you know. Trust yourself. Lena's throat went tight. Thank you. Just the truth. He hesitated. You're going to do great tomorrow. You know that, right? I don't know anything right now. Then trust me. I've seen you survive things that would break most people. An interview's nothing. Lena set down the journal and hugged him. Rowan was getting better at this. His arms came up immediately, held her tight. I'm scared, she admitted against his shoulder. Good. Means it matters. He pulled back, looked at her seriously. Fear's not the enemy, Lena. Letting it stop you is. The capital was overwhelming. Buildings 3 and 4 stories tall, streets packed with wagons and people, noise and movement that never stopped. Lena had thought the settlement was bustling. This was something else entirely. The academy was housed in a converted mansion on the edge of town, grand, imposing, beautiful. Lena walked up the steps feeling completely out of place in her best dress, which suddenly seemed shabby and provincial. Inside, 20 other girls waited in a formal parlor. They were all older, better dressed, more polished. They chatted about their previous education, about family connections, about expectations. Lena sat quietly, clutching her folder of documents, trying not to panic. Lena Cross? A woman stood in the doorway, tall, elegant, with gray hair pulled back severely. I'm Dean Patricia Harlow. Please come with me. Lena followed her to an office lined with books. 3 people sat behind a long table. Dean Harlow in the center, flanked by 2 others, all watching her with appraising eyes. Please sit, Harlow said. Lena sat. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. Your application was unusual, Harlow began. Most of our candidates come from established families with formal education. You're self-taught with documented work experience and, she glanced at a paper, an extraordinary recommendation from Judge Brennan. Lena blinked. Judge Brennan? She sent a letter last week. Said you were one of the most courageous young women she'd encountered in 30 years on the bench. That your commitment to justice was born from personal experience with injustice. Harlow looked up. She also said you argued your own case better than some lawyers she'd seen. I didn't argue it. Mr. Vance did. Your testimony, then. She was impressed. Harlow folded her hands. Tell me why you want to study law, Miss Cross. And please don't give me a rehearsed answer. I want to know what drives you. Lena took a breath, forgot everything she'd practiced, spoke from the gut. Because I was sold when I was 16, stood on a platform while men bid on me like I was property, and there was nothing I could do because the law didn't protect me. It wasn't written for girls like me. Her voice gained strength. I got lucky. Someone saved me. But most girls don't get saved. They just disappear into situations that destroy them, and nobody cares because legally they're nothing. She met Harlow's eyes. I want to change that. Want to be the lawyer who fights for the girls nobody fights for, who makes sure the law protects everyone, not just people with money and power. That's why I want this. Silence. The 3 interviewers exchanged glances. Then Harlow smiled. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. The rest of the interview was technical. Questions about her education, her work history, her ability to handle the rigorous program. Lena answered as honestly as she could, not trying to hide her gaps in formal learning, instead emphasizing what she'd taught herself and why. When it ended, Harlow walked her to the door. We'll notify you of our decision within 2 weeks, she said. But Miss Cross, between you and me, I think you're exactly the kind of student we need. The stage ride back felt longer than the trip there. Lena stared out the window, replaying the interview, trying not to hope too hard. 2 weeks felt like forever. She arrived back at the settlement exhausted and wired. Rowan was waiting at the stage stop, trying to look casual and failing. How'd it go? He asked. I have no idea. Either really well or really badly. No in between. That's usually how it works. He took her bag. You want to talk about it or forget about it? Forget. Definitely forget. They walked back to the store in comfortable silence. The settlement felt different after 3 days in the capital. Smaller, quieter, simpler. Not worse, just different. Lena realized with a start that she could see herself leaving this place. Could imagine a life beyond these streets. When had that happened? The 2 weeks crawled by. Lena threw herself into work, trying not to check the mail every day, trying not to catastrophize. Miss Chen kept her busy with extra studies. Rowan dragged her on long walks when her anxiety got too intense. "What if I don't get in?" she asked one evening, watching the sunset from their usual spot outside town. "Then you try somewhere else, or you find another path. The world's got more than one door." That's very philosophical. I contain multitudes. Lena laughed despite herself. Since when? Since I started spending time with a girl who won't let me wallow in self-pity. You still wallow. You're just better at hiding it. Fair. They sat as the sky turned purple and gold. Lena thought about the academy, about the capital, about all the futures spreading out in front of her like roads on a map. It was thrilling and terrifying. "I'm going to miss this," she said quietly. "If I go, I'm going to miss you." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "I'll miss you too, but I'll also be proud as hell, and I'll be here when you come back. Promise?" "Promise." The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Lena saw it in the mail pile and her heart stopped. She grabbed it, ran to the back room and stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Her hand shook as she unfolded the paper. "Dear Miss Cross, we are pleased to inform you of your acceptance to the Territorial Women's Academy Law Program for the fall term." She read it 3 times. 4. The words didn't change. She'd gotten in. She'd actually gotten in. Lena let out a sound between a laugh and a sob, set the letter down carefully like it might disintegrate. Then she ran to find Rowan. He was at the livery helping shoe a horse. She grabbed his arm and pulled him outside, ignoring the stable hand's confused look. "I got in," she said breathlessly. "I got in, Rowan. They accepted me." For a moment he just stared at her. Then a smile broke across his face. Huge, genuine, transformative. "Yeah, you did?" he said. "I knew you would." Then he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like idiots, and Lena felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was her path. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of preparation. Lena had to arrange housing in the capital, gather supplies, save money for expenses not covered by the scholarship. The settlement rallied around her. Mr. Peterson gave her a bonus and promised her job would be waiting if she ever wanted it back. Miss Chen helped her order books. Sheriff Morrison wrote another recommendation, this time for a part-time position at the Capitol Courthouse. Rowan was quieter than usual. He helped with everything, never complained, but Lena could see the tension in him, the fear of being left behind. 1 week before she was set to leave, they took a final trip to his cabin. Lena had asked to see it one more time, to remember where she'd started. The write-up was familiar now. She knew every turn, every landmark. The cabin looked the same, solid, isolated, peaceful. But it felt different, smaller somehow, less like a refuge and more like a memory. They spent the day there. Rowan showed her repairs he'd made, improvements to the lean-to, a new garden plot. Lena helped him stack firewood, tend the goats, all the simple tasks that had once terrified her. As the sun set, they sat on the porch steps, watching the mountains turn purple. "I was thinking," Rowan said slowly, "about selling this place." Lena looked at him, shocked. "What? Why?" "Because I don't need it anymore. Needed it when I was hiding from the world, but I'm not hiding anymore." He met her eyes. "You showed me that. Showed me there's more to life than just surviving alone." "So what would you do instead?" "Get a place in the settlement, something smaller, keep working, maybe take on some apprentices." Peterson mentioned needing help expanding the store. He shrugged. "Build a life instead of just existing in one." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. Rowan, that's huge." "Yeah, well, you're not the only one who can grow." She leaned against him. He put his arm around her shoulders. They sat there as stars emerged, two people who'd saved each other, learning to be whole. I'm going to write you one, Lena said. Every week, tell you everything I'm learning. I'd like that. And you'll write back? I'll try. Writing's not my strong suit. You'll get better. I'll make you get better. Rowan smiled. I believe you would. The day Lena left was bright and clear. Half the settlement turned out to see her off. She'd packed everything she owned into 2 bags. Still not much, but more than she'd had a year ago. More than she'd ever thought she'd have. Mr. Peterson hugged her. Make us proud. I will. Miss Chen pressed a package into her hands. Books. For your journey, don't read them all at once. No promises. Sheriff Morrison just nodded. Stay sharp. Stay strong. Don't let anyone tell you you don't belong there. Yes, ma'am. Then Rowan. He'd been standing back, letting others say goodbye. Now he stepped forward. They looked at each other. So much said without words. Be safe, he said finally. I will. You too. Right when you get there. The second I arrive. And Lena? He took her hand. Don't look back. Don't second guess. Just go forward and be everything you're meant to be. Lena squeezed his hand. Thank you. For everything. For seeing me when nobody else did. Didn't see you, just saw what was already there. The stage driver called for final boarding. Lena climbed up, found her seat by the window. The stage lurched forward. She looked back once, saw Rowan standing there, hand raised, watching her go. Saw the settlement where she'd rebuilt herself. The people who'd believed in her, the life she was leaving behind. Then she turned forward, toward the Capitol, toward the Academy, toward everything waiting. The girl who'd been sold was gone. In her place was someone new, someone strong, someone free, someone choosing her own path. Lena Cross was going to change the world, or at least she was going to try. And trying, she'd learned, was everything. The Academy broke Lena in the first 3 months. Not literally. Not the way Dry Hollow had tried to break her. This was different, subtler, more insidious. It was the constant feeling of being behind, of not knowing things everyone else seemed to know instinctively. It was the other students with their fancy clothes and finishing school manners, the professors who expected you to already understand concepts you'd never encountered, the reading that never ended. Lena studied until her eyes burned, worked at the courthouse 4 mornings a week filing documents, then attended classes until evening, then studied until midnight. Every night. No breaks, no mercy. She wrote to Rowan every Sunday, as promised. Short letters at first, too tired to write more, describing her classes, her work, the overwhelming nature of everything. His responses came every 2 weeks, written in his careful, labored handwriting. He told her about the settlement, about selling the cabin, about the small house he'd bought near the creek, about the apprentice he'd taken on, a kid from town who needed direction, about how quiet everything was without her. Don't quit, he wrote in November. I know you're thinking about it. Don't. You're stronger than whatever's trying to break you. He was right. She'd been thinking about quitting, had been for weeks. But she didn't. The turning point came in December, during contract law. Professor Aldridge was lecturing about consideration and bargaining power when Lena's hand shot up. That's wrong, she said. The classroom went silent. Aldridge stopped mid-sentence. Excuse me? Lena's heart pounded, but she didn't back down. You said both parties in a contract have equal bargaining power. But that's not true. Not in practice. When someone's desperate, when they're starving or scared or about to lose everything, they don't have power. They just have desperation. And the other party knows it and exploits it. Aldridge's eyebrows rose. An interesting perspective, Miss Cross, but legally maybe they're equal. But actually, no. The law pretends people negotiate from the same position, but they don't. And that's how people get exploited, how girls get sold, how workers get cheated, how the powerful stay powerful. The room was completely silent now. Lena realized she was standing, realized her voice had risen, realized she'd just challenged a professor in front of 30 students. Aldridge stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. Sit down, Miss Cross. He turned to the board. And everyone, pay attention. Because Miss Cross just articulated something it took me 10 years of practice to understand. The law and justice are not the same thing. The law is what's written. Justice is what should be. Our job, your job if you survive this program, is to bridge that gap. After class, 3 students approached Lena, not to mock her, to ask questions, to talk about their own experiences with unjust systems. By the end of the week, she'd formed a study group, 5 women, all from backgrounds the academy didn't usually see, all fighting to prove they belonged. It got easier after that. Not easy, but easier. Lena found her rhythm, found her people, found her voice. She spent her first break back at the settlement in late spring. The stage rolled in on a warm May evening, and Lena stepped off feeling like a different person. Same body, different soul. Rowan was waiting. He looked different too. Less gaunt, less haunted. He'd trimmed his beard, was wearing clothes that fit properly, looked almost domesticated. "You look good," he said. "So do you. Is that a new shirt?" Peterson convinced me I couldn't keep wearing the same 3 shirts forever. Miracles do happen. They grinned at each other. Then Rowan pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. "Missed you," he said against her hair. "Missed you too." That night, Lena told him everything, about the classes, the studying, the moment she'd challenged Aldridge, about her study group and the courthouse work and the cases she was starting to understand. "There's this whole world of law protecting property and contracts and business," she said, pacing his small living room. "But almost nothing protecting people, especially women, especially poor people. It's like the system was designed to keep certain people powerless." "It was," Rowan said. "That's not an accident. I know, but it doesn't have to stay that way." She turned to face him. "I'm learning how to change it, how to use the law to protect people instead of just property. It's hard and slow and probably impossible, but you're doing it anyway." "Yeah, I am." Rowan looked at her with something like awe. "You've changed. Is that bad?" "It's amazing. You're amazing." He stood, cross to her. "I'm proud of you. You know that?" Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "You could have. You would have found another way." He touched her face gently. "But I'm glad I got to be part of it." They spent 2 weeks together, fell into an easy rhythm, mornings at the store where Lena helped with bookkeeping and inventory, afternoons walking or riding, evenings talking until late. It was comfortable, natural, like coming home. On her last night, they sat by the creek behind Rowan's house, watching the water catch moonlight. "I was thinking," Rowan said carefully, "about visiting the capital, maybe in the fall." Lena looked at him, surprised. "Really? You hate cities. I hate being away from you more." He picked up a stone, tossed it into the water. "Figured I should face my fears. You're facing yours. Seems fair. You don't have to do that for me. I'm doing it for me. Because you're right. I can't hide forever. And because—" He stopped. Started again. "Because I want to see your life there. Want to understand what you're building." Lena leaned against his shoulder. "I'd like that. You meeting my study group, seeing the courthouse, all of it. They're lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the creek, to the nightbirds, to the quiet that had once been Rowan's only companion and was now something he chose to share. "1 more year," Lena said quietly. "1 more year and I'll have my certificate. Then I can practice law. Help people. You already help people just by existing, just by showing what's possible. That's very philosophical for you." "I'm learning," he smiled. "From the best." The second year was harder than the first. The coursework intensified. Lena took on more hours at the courthouse, working directly with advocates now, seeing real cases involving real people with real stakes. She saw women fighting for custody of children, saw workers cheated of wages, saw people crushed by systems designed to crush them. She also saw lawyers who cared, who fought anyway, who used the law as a weapon for the powerless instead of the powerful. That's what she wanted to be. In November, Judge Brennan visited the academy to give a lecture. Afterward, she asked to speak with Lena privately. "I've been following your progress," Brennan said. Dean Harlow tells me you're top of your class in advocacy. I work hard. You do more than work hard. You fight. There's a difference. Brennan leaned forward. I have a proposition. After you graduate, I'm prepared to offer you a position as my clerk. 1 year, working directly with me on the territorial circuit. You'd see cases across the entire territory. Learn how law works and doesn't work in practice. Lena's heart stuttered. That's an incredible opportunity. It's also brutal. Long hours, low pay, constant travel. You'd see the worst of humanity and occasionally the best. You'd make enemies. People don't like it when you try to change systems that benefit them. I've made enemies before. Brennan smiled. Yes, I read the transcripts of your father's petition. The way you testified, clear, unflinching, honest. That's what good advocacy looks like. That's what I need. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. I need an answer by spring. Brennan stood. You're going to do important work, Miss Cross. I'd like to help you do it right. After Brennan left, Lena sat alone in the empty classroom, trying to process what just happened. A clerkship with a territorial judge was the kind of opportunity people spent years hoping for. It would give her experience, connections, credibility. Would open doors she'd never imagined, but it also meant another year away from the settlement, another year away from Rowan. She wrote to him that night, explaining the offer, asking what he thought. His response came faster than usual. Take it. Don't even hesitate. This is what you worked for. I'll still be here when you're done. I'll always be here. Reading those words, Lena realized something. She loved him. Had loved him for a while, probably. Not the desperate clinging of someone who needed saving, but the steady certainty of someone who'd chosen well, who'd found someone worth choosing. She wrote back immediately. I love you. I should have said it sooner. I should say it more. I love you, and I'm taking the clerkship, and when I'm done, we're going to build something together. I promise. His response was characteristically brief. I love you too. Always have. Now go change the world. I'll be here when you need me. Graduation came in May. Lena stood with her class, smaller now than it started, some had dropped out or failed, and received her certificate of completion. She was officially qualified to practice law in the territory. Dean Harlow gave a speech about duty and service and using their education for good. But Lena barely heard it. She was scanning the crowd looking for one person. And then she saw him. Rowan, standing in the back, looking uncomfortable in formal clothes that were clearly new. He'd made the journey, had faced his fear of cities and crowds to be here. Their eyes met. He smiled. After the ceremony, after the congratulations and the forced pleasantries with people she'd never see again, Lena found him outside. You came, she said. Wasn't going to miss this. He looked at her in her academic robes. You look different. Official. I feel different. She took his hand. I'm glad you're here. Wouldn't be anywhere else. They walked through the capital streets together, Lena pointing out places that had become familiar. The courthouse where she'd worked, the library where she'd studied, the cafe where her study group met. Rowan listened, asked questions, seemed genuinely interested. It's a lot, he said finally. All of this. The buildings, the people, the noise. Do you hate it? No, it's just different from what I know. He looked at her. But I could learn, if I needed to. You don't need to. We'll figure it out. Whatever comes next, we'll figure it out together. Rowan pulled her close. Yeah, we will. The clerkship was everything Brennan promised. Brutal, exhausting, educational. Lena traveled the circuit with the judge, hearing cases in small towns and settlements across the territory. She saw the law at its best and worst, saw justice served and justice denied, saw people broken by systems and people fighting back against them. And slowly, she started making a difference. In a small mining town, she helped a group of workers file a collective complaint against a company that was shorting their wages. The company settled rather than face a public trial. In a farming community, she worked with a woman trying to escape an abusive marriage, found legal precedents, built a case, got the woman legal separation and custody of her children. In a frontier settlement not unlike her own, she encountered a girl on a platform being sold by her father. Lena intervened, cited the exact laws Thomas Cross had tried to use, got the sheriff to stop the sale and remove the girl to territorial protection. The girl's name was Mary. She was 15. Terrified, reminded Lena of herself 2 years ago. "What happens now?" Mary asked. "Now you get a choice," Lena said, "about where you go, what you do, who you become. It won't be easy, but it'll be yours." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Thank the judge, thank the law, but mostly thank yourself for being brave enough to want something different." After Mary was settled with a local family who'd agreed to take her in, Brennan pulled Lena aside. "You did good work today," she said, "just what needed doing." "That's what good work is." Brennan paused. "You're ready, to practice on your own. You don't need me anymore. I'll always need you. You taught me how to do this. I taught you procedure. You already knew how to fight." Brennan looked at her seriously. "What are you going to do when this clerkship ends? You could work anywhere. Capital firms would hire you in a heartbeat. You could make real money." Lena thought about the capital, about the fancy offices and the wealthy clients and the comfortable life she could build there. Then she thought about Mary, about all the Marys in small towns who had no one to fight for them. "I'm going back to the settlement," she said. "Going to open a practice. Help people who can't afford fancy lawyers. Make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else if I can prevent it." Brennan smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." The clerkship ended in late summer. Lena returned to the settlement with a year of experience, a head full of knowledge, and a plan. Rowan met her at the stage stop like always, but this time she wasn't leaving. This time she was home to stay. "So, Huss," he said, taking her bags, "you're really doing this? Opening a practice?" "I'm really doing this." "Where?" "Peterson's letting me use the back room at the store. It's small, but it's enough." She grinned. "I'm going to be the settlement's first resident lawyer. They're lucky to have you. We'll see if they agree when I start filing complaints against people." They walked back through familiar streets. Lena saw people she knew, buildings she recognized, the life she'd left behind to build herself into someone new. It felt different now. Felt like she belonged here not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she'd chosen it. That night they sat in Rowan's house, their house now. Lena had moved her things in before leaving for the clerkship and talked about the future. "I want to do more than just practice law," Lena said. "I want to change it, push for new protections, make it illegal to sell children, force courts to consider economic duress in contracts, create real consequences for exploitation." "That's ambitious. It's necessary." She looked at him. "People like my father, like Carson, like everyone who tried to own me, they only have power because the law lets them. Change the law, change the power structure. You'll make enemies. Good. The right enemies means you're doing something that matters." Rowan laughed. "When did you get so fierce?" "I've always been fierce, just took me a while to admit it." "Yeah, you did." He pulled her close. "I'm in, Whatever you need. Research, testimony, someone to watch your back when you piss off the wrong people. I'm in." "Even if it's dangerous?" "Especially if it's dangerous. You think I went through all this just to let you fight alone?" Lena kissed him. Properly this time, not the tentative almost kisses of the past few years, but something definite and real. When they pulled apart, Rowan was smiling. "About time," he said. "Shut up. Make me." So she did. Lena's practice started slowly. Her first client was a widow fighting to keep her land from a speculator claiming her deed was invalid. Lena found the original filing, proved the claim was fraudulent, won the case. Her second client was a farmer whose water rights were being stolen by a larger operation upstream. Lena researched territorial water law, filed an injunction, negotiated a settlement. Word spread. More clients came. Workers with wage complaints. Women seeking divorces. People who'd been cheated, exploited, ignored by systems designed to protect everyone but them. Lena took every case, charged what people could afford, which was often nothing, made enemies of wealthy landowners, corrupt officials, anyone who profited from powerlessness. She loved every minute of it. In her second year of practice, she took on the territorial government itself, A new regulation allowed sheriffs to arrest unmarried women for vagrancy if they couldn't prove employment. It was being used to force women into indentured servitude, essentially legal slavery. Lena filed a challenge, argued that the regulation violated basic rights, that it was being weaponized against vulnerable populations, that it needed to be struck down. The case went all the way to the territorial Supreme Court. Lena stood before 5 judges and argued that freedom wasn't conditional on employment or marital status, that women were full citizens deserving full protection, that the law existed to protect people, not control them. She lost. 4-1, the court upheld the regulation. Lena walked out of that courthouse feeling like she'd failed everyone, failed the women who'd trusted her, failed the younger version of herself who'd believed law could create justice. Rowan found her that night sitting by the creek, staring at nothing. "I lost," she said. "I heard. I thought I could win. Thought if I argued well enough, presented enough evidence, they'd have to see. But they didn't care. They never cared." Rowan sat beside her. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know. Give up. Maybe the system's too broken to fix." "You don't believe that?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You remember what you told Mary, the girl in that town? You told her being brave enough to want something different was enough, that the fight itself mattered. I was wrong. You were right. You can't win every fight, Lena. Sometimes the system beats you. But you keep fighting anyway because the alternative is giving up, and you're not someone who gives up." Lena looked at him. "How are you so sure?" "Because I know you. Have known you since you were terrified and 16 and convinced you were worth nothing. Watched you prove yourself wrong over and over. This is just another time you're going to prove yourself wrong." He stood, offered his hand. "Come on, we've got work to do." "What work?" "If you can't change the law through the courts, you change it through the legislature. We start organizing, get people to petition their representatives, make enough noise that they can't ignore it." Lena took his hand. Let him pull her up. "That could take years." "Probably, but we've got years." He smiled. "And you're not doing this alone. Not anymore." So they organized. Lena drafted petitions. Rowan gathered signatures. They held meetings in the settlement, in neighboring towns, anywhere people would listen. Talked about rights and protections and why the law needed to change. It was slow, frustrating. Most people didn't care or were too afraid to get involved. But some did. Some saw what Lena and Rowan were building and wanted to be part of it. 3 years later, a representative introduced a bill to repeal the vagrancy regulation. It passed. Not easily, not cleanly, but it passed. The day it became law, Lena sat in her office and cried. Not from relief, from vindication. From the knowledge that change was possible if you fought hard enough and long enough and refused to give up. Rowan found her there, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by papers and law books and everything she'd built. "We did it," she said. "You did it. I just helped. We did it together." He pulled her into his arms. "Yeah, we did." That night, they got married. Nothing fancy, just them and the judge and 2 witnesses. No ceremony, no fuss, just a legal recognition of what they'd been building for years. Lena wore a simple dress. Rowan wore the suit he'd bought for her graduation. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about partnership and choice, and building something together. When the judge declared them married, Rowan kissed her like it was the first time and the 1,000th time all at once. "Mrs. Hale," he said against her lips. "Actually, I'm keeping cross." "Of course you are. But you can call me Mrs. Hale in private if you want." "I want." They spent their wedding night in the small house by the creek, talking until dawn about everything they'd accomplished and everything still left to do, about the cases Lena wanted to take, the protections she wanted to build, the future she wanted to create. "Do you ever regret it, ma'am?" Rowan asked as the sky started to lighten. "Taking me up on that offer to try, staying with me instead of moving to the capital, making real money, having an easier life." Lena looked at him, at this man who'd saved her, and let her save him, who'd stood beside her through everything, who'd chosen to live instead of just survive. "Never," she said. "Not once. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." Even though it's hard? Especially because it's hard. Easy doesn't change anything. Hard changes everything. 5 years after opening her practice, Lena received a letter from the Territorial Women's Academy. They wanted her to come speak to students about frontier law and advocacy for vulnerable populations. She stood in the same classroom where she'd challenged Professor Aldridge and told her story. All of it. Being sold, being saved, fighting for freedom, learning to use law as a weapon for justice instead of oppression. The system will try to break you, she told them. It's designed to break people like us, people without money or power or connections. But breaking is different from bending. You can bend without breaking. You can survive and then thrive, and then change the very system that tried to destroy you. After her speech, a young woman approached. She was quiet, nervous, clearly poor based on her worn clothes. Miss Cross? My name is Lena. I'm here on scholarship. She stopped, started again. I was almost sold too, to a factory in the East. Someone intervened, got me into a protection program, helped me get here. And I just wanted to say thank you for showing us it's possible to survive and still fight. Lena took the girl's hands, saw herself in those eyes, saw every girl who'd ever been made to feel worthless. You're going to do amazing things, she said. I can tell. And when you do, you'll inspire someone else. That's how we change the world. One person at a time, showing what's possible. Elena nodded, tears in her eyes. I won't let you down. You can't let me down. You're not doing this for me. You're doing it for you, and that's exactly right. On the stage ride home, Lena stared out the window and thought about everything that had led her here. Thought about the platform in Dry Hollow, about Rowan's quiet courage, about Judge Brennan's mentorship, about every case she'd won and lost, about the law she'd helped change and the laws still left to fight. She thought about her father, who she'd heard had died 2 years ago in some frontier town, broke and alone. She'd felt nothing when she heard. Not anger, not grief, not satisfaction, just nothing. He was a part of her past, but he didn't define her present or her future. She thought about Thomas Cross standing in the Dry Hollow Square, deciding his daughter was worth less than $75 in supplies. And she thought about Lena Cross, sitting in a stagecoach, returning home to a husband she loved and a practice that mattered and a life she'd built from absolute nothing. The first Lena Cross had died on that platform. The second Lena Cross had been born the moment Rowan Hale decided one girl's freedom was worth fighting for. And the third Lena Cross, the one she was now, had been forged through every fight, every case, every small victory against systems designed to keep her powerless. That Lena Cross was fierce, unbreakable, free, and she was just getting started. Rowan met her at the stage stop like always. Older now, graying at the temples, but still solid, still hers. How'd it go? He asked. Good, really good. I think I inspired some future troublemakers. The world needs more troublemakers. It really does. She took his arm. Walk with me? They walked through the settlement as the sun set, past the store where she'd learned to be useful, past the courthouse where she'd fought for her freedom, past the boarding house where she'd eaten terrible stew and fallen in love without realizing it. You know what I realized today? Lena said. What's that? I'm happy. Actually happy. Not just surviving or getting by. Happy. Rowan squeezed her hand. Me too. We did it. We built something real. We did, and we're not done yet. No, we're not. They stood at the edge of town, looking at the mountains where everything started, where a broken soldier had learned to live again, and a sold girl had learned she was worth fighting for. Thank you, Lena said quietly, for seeing me, for saving me. You saved yourself. I just gave you the chance. We saved each other. Yeah, we did. Somewhere in the settlement, a girl was learning to read. A woman was filing for divorce. A worker was demanding fair wages. And tomorrow, Lena would help them, would fight for them, would use everything she'd learned to make sure they had the same chance she'd had, the chance to choose, the chance to be free, the chance to build a life instead of just enduring one. That was the real victory, not the cases won or the laws changed or the recognition received, The real victory was in the multiplication. Every person she helped might help someone else, creating ripples that spread further than she could see. Lena Cross had been sold for $75 and a bag of flour, but she'd bought herself back with courage, education, and the stubborn refusal to accept that her worth was determined by anyone but her. And now she spent her days helping others do the same. That was justice. That was freedom. That was enough. As they walked home through the gathering dark, Rowan's hand in hers, Lena thought about young girls in frontier towns standing on platforms, waiting to be sold. Thought about how many of them would never get saved, how many would disappear into situations that destroyed them. She couldn't save them all, but she could save some. And those some would save others. And slowly, person by person, case by case, the world would change. It had to. Because the alternative, accepting that people could be bought and sold and discarded, was unthinkable. Lena Cross had proven that one girl's life could matter, could change things, could ripple outward in ways nobody expected. She'd been property, she'd become a person, and now she was a force. The girl who was sold had rewritten her own ending, and in doing so, she'd rewritten the beginning for countless others. That was the story, not of a victim, but of a survivor who became a fighter, who became a force for change. And it was far from over.